So I'm in the home of Bill Betenson, who is one of the leading researchers on Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, and has wrote several books on it and goes around and doing lectures and stuff. And he's agreed to come and talk to us at the Moon Lake Gathering, which is going to be held August 23rd and 24th in Altamont, Utah. This is 2024. This is 2024. So Bill, man, I want to know a few things, man, and I am so thrilled that he's coming to talk to us, because there is a lot of history in that area where we're going to be at, but the surrounding area, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and the Outlaws, and Bill has tracked down every inch of that. So what got you interested in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? And I know you got an answer, so let's hear that.
So it's just been with me since I was a kid. So I grew up hearing the stories about Butch Cassidy. My great grandma was Butch's sister. So my parents grew up in southern Utah, then they moved to northern Utah, and so we always were going back to Kanab, and we'd always stop in Circleville to visit with Lula, Butch's sister, and she outlived all her siblings. Butch was the oldest of 13. She was 9th of 13, and she outlived everybody, and so she always had stories about him, so I just grew up with that. The movie came out, they flew her back to New York. It was a big, exciting thing. And then she wrote a book in the 70s, and so in fact, my earliest memories are going to the premiere of the movie, because they were trying to get her to buy in on the movie, and she says, well, I won't unless I can see it. And so they had a little family premiere, and my parents couldn't find a babysitter, and I got to go. I was
cool.
4 years old, and I still remember sitting there watching the movie thinking, man, this is the coolest thing ever. So it's just like been with me my whole life. So I've just always been interested in it. As I got older, I thought her book would settle all the controversy with Butch, and as I've got older, I realized there's probably no book that's ever going to satisfy everybody. So I just kept researching, and then after 20 years of research, and decided I was going to do a book. So I've actually written a couple, and I go around and as people invite me to speak and it's just a lot of fun. It's a good hobby.
And you'll be selling them with us.
Yeah, I'll have the books there at Altamont. So yeah.
So man, we're talking that you got to talk with Butch's sister. She was your
great grandma.
Great grandma. You got to hear her stories firsthand, plus what your parents told you.
Right.
And so it led you down some avenues to research that most people didn't have access to.
Right. Yeah. So really, I inherited all her files and research and all that. So I've got her handwritten manuscript of the book, and it had stuff in there that didn't get put in her book, and then I've been able to expand from that and go out and go through court records and old newspapers. And that's the other thing that's fun, is as they continue to digitize old newspapers, we're still finding little nuggets of information that fills in the picture and that. So it's still an ongoing thing. It's a lot of fun.
So it's an ongoing controversy. People say 100% Butch and Sundance didn't die in Bolivia. 100% they came back here.
Right.
So what is the 100% truth according to what you heard from
Lula was
family?
adamant that he'd come back. She said he came back and visited the families in 1925 in Circleville, and she gave a lot of details on that. And in my 30 plus years of research, I've not found anything that would dissuade my believing that. I've actually traveled went down to South America, went to Argentina, saw his ranch, and visited with people down there that also believed that he had made it back to the U.S. and died up here. So that's what she was adamant about, and I still believe that to this day.
So out here in the West, I don't know about the East. I guess back there in the East, they got Jesse James. But out here in the West, man, you got Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, the Wild West, the Wild Bunch. I guess it was known as something else, but their gang, and they hung around this area. And there was where we're going to be at, and all around there. And if you come out to the Moon Lake Gathering, some of the places you need to go check out is out by what's that What's the hangout there on Green River? What's that?
Oh,
Browns Park.
Browns Park,
You
yeah.
need to go check out Browns Park. There's some cool things out
Right,
there.
yeah.
So can you give these guys anything that they could go check out that maybe Butch was at or hung out at or something, some places that they, while they're out, because some of these people come from all over the country to come here, and man, you need to check out some of this stuff. Besides coming and hear your stories, which is going to be fantastic, but you need to check out some of this other stuff. So what's some stuff so they can check out?
So one of the things they have there in Browns Park is the old John Jarvie Ranch that the state, I believe it's either state or federal site, and they actually have it as a living museum. You can go in and see the buildings and that. And there actually is an old dugout there that's supposedly where Butch and Sundance used to hide out, that you can go in and see that. That's pretty cool to see. So he worked on the Bassett Ranch, was on the other end of Browns Park, and that ranch is still there, so you can go see that. They have an old Bassett cemetery that has a lot of the old members of the family that Butch was familiar with. He also worked for Charlie Krause. And if you go over Diamond Mountain from Vernal into Browns Park, you go down Krause Canyon, and that's right where, Butch worked as a jockey for when he was just a young lad working for Charlie Krause, racing horses and that. So that's, you can see all that down there.
Cool. So give us a teaser on what you'll be talking about and sharing with us.
I was gonna cover his life and maybe give some aspects of, the family aspect that people probably haven't heard before, and talk about some of the controversies about, what happened to him. Everybody wants to know where he's buried, and so I'll be talking about stuff like that. So, yeah, been answering anybody's questions. So,
cool. You guys got anything to ask?
How does Josie Bassett fit in with Butch?
So she was a girl when he worked for the family on the ranch. So there was two sisters. There was Ann. She was probably a little more famous because she was known as
Queen Anne.
Queen Anne, yeah. Because there was a trial. She had married one of the foremen for one of the big cattle outfits out there, but they were trying to convict her and she got off. But yeah, she was quite well known. But Josie outlived her sister, and she's the one that squatted on, they're just up from Jensen on Dinosaur National Monument or whatever. Her old cabin is still there. You can go in and see. In Vernal. Yeah, it's east of Vernal. East of Vernal, and then up north a little bit, right off the Green River. So she was a good friend, and she was adamant. In fact, she said she saw Butch and Elsie Lay 2 different times in the 30s after they were supposedly killed in South America. She was running a hotel, I think, in Rock Springs, and then I think the other time she saw them in bags or so. She said they were older and a little overweight, and so yeah.
Well, Elsie Lay plays a big part with Butch.
Yeah, really, he was Butch's best friend, and Sundance really didn't come into the picture till later. I think they became friends out of necessity. After Castlegate was a daring daylight robbery. They got a lot of press, front page news, and so they went down to New Mexico and that's one of the things Butch would do is to hide out. He'd go get a job on a ranch and just kind of blend in. And they were working on the WS Ranch, and Elsie got in with the Ketchum brothers, and they robbed a train, and Butch was, against him doing that, but he got wounded and captured, and so he got sent to prison in New Mexico, and that's why he didn't go to South America. That's why Sundance ended up being the one that went with him. But yeah, Elsie got out of prison, and I was actually really good friends with his grandson.
Really?
Yeah, Harv Murdoch. He just passed away a few years ago, but they were really tight, and I think they were really the brains behind planning the robberies and that.
So you have been researching this for basically all your life, and you got to know a lot of these people.
Yeah.
That knew firsthand history, and you're going to be sharing it with us at the Moon Lake Gathering, August 23rd, 24th. And we're still putting things together. Not sure exactly which night he's speaking, but we got a lot of great things planned. So put this on your calendar. What? Mark's pointing at the saddle, man. What do we got here?
Tell us about the saddle a little, Bill.
All right, so this is a saddle like what Butch took to South America. It's made by Mueller out of Pueblo, Colorado, but that's very similar to the one that he took with him. And I guess they didn't have good saddles down there, but yeah, that's like what he took with him. Him and Sundance took their own saddles. The other thing is, what's kind of cool is their house in Argentina had all the windows down there were shutters, and the windows, actually, they must have had them shipped in, but they were, they opened up. They were American slide, they would slide up, and that's kind of a distinguishing feature of this cabinet they built in little Cholila, Argentina. So
well, now they robbed the pants off them down there while they were there, right?
So when they went down, they weren't. They were trying to, just start all over and be law-abiding citizens, and they were for several years. And I don't know. This is still something that I scratch my head over, because I think he sought to be left alone and not be chased. And I don't know if he had become an adrenaline junkie and just got bored and missed that. But there was in I think it was 1905, there was a robbery in Rio Gallegos that was 700 miles away from the ranch, and there's evidence that they were not at the robbery because they were signing papers to obtain ownership to their land on the very day of the robbery. But I think it was two of their friends that they had taught, if you were to rob a bank, this is what you do, because the Pinkertons had figured out where they were at. They tried to get the banks and railroads to fund them to go down and capture them, and the banks and railroads were like, they're out of our hair. We don't want anything to do with them. They're not robbing from us. Just leave them be. And the Pinkertons had a reputation to uphold, so they sent an agent down, and then they started reading the mail as they sent mail home to friends and that, figured out where they were at.
They were tapping their mail.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so when they couldn't get the banks and railroads to fund them, then they just notified all the authorities and said, these two notorious outlaws, if there's ever a robbery in the area, they're likely responsible. So when the Rio Gallegos happened, then and Butch and Sundance were well established in the area. They were tight with the local police and that, and they got tipped off that they were coming to arrest them, to question them about this robbery. And that's when they sold off their possessions and escaped into Chile over the Andes, and then headed north towards Bolivia. But for 4 or 5 years they lived without, we're just trying to be law-abiding citizens.
Well, Bill, when they came back to the U.S., I don't want to ruin everything for the powwow, but did they continue raising hell when they got back to the U.S., robbing and?
I don't think so. So when they went back on the run, they did go back into Argentina and rob a bank and nearly got captured. It was a pretty close, because I don't know if they were out of practice or what, but. And then there was some robbing in South America and that, but I think when they came back, I think they just tried to
go straight.
Yeah, they'd aged enough. I think they just wanted to settle down.
Did they split up the Butch?
Yeah, so Lula said that he told the family that he got separated from Sundance, and he wasn't sure what had happened. He'd come back separate to the U.S. and the Sundance family, I've friends with the Longabaugh family. They're kind of split on what happened to him. Some are adamant that he was killed because he was writing to his sister, and after the gun battle in San Vicente, Bolivia, they said those letters stopped. But there's other members of the family said that no, it continued on for a certain time and then stopped. So some believe that he was killed and some don't. So I think there's and I don't really know. I know that at a place that that Sundance brought her back to San Francisco, and then she disappeared. But I think Butch made his way back, and I think he just tried to lay low, and he just went and visited friends, and just tried to enjoy life, what life he had left. So
You know, I've got a good friend of mine who's 90 now,
yeah,
and was it him or his dad? They saw Butch in Penguich way after. And there's just too many people.
there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories up in Wyoming, and so there was Larry Pointer is a good friend. He actually wrote the foreword in my first book. He wrote a book in search of Butch Cassidy, and the theory was that this William T. Phillips was Butch Cassidy. We've since figured out that no, that wasn't him. Lula said from the day one that wasn't her brother, but this William T. Phillips was actually in prison the same time as Butch in Wyoming, and I think they knew each other and could have been friends and working together. But I think, and he looked a lot. He had some similar features in that, and I think he visited some friends and fooled folks in that. But I wonder if the two were working together and that. But yeah, there's too many people that knew them well, including the family, that said he came back. That it's hard to just blow that off. And there's not solid evidence that they were killed. I mean, there were 2 outlaws killed. They were buried as unknowns. They were never identified. And then there's stories that it was them, but they were never identified. And then in the 90s they exhumed the graves and did DNA testing, and it was negative. And then they're like, well, we just dug up the wrong graves. Well, the story was, it was a murder-suicide, and the skeletal remains matched that. So they were 99% sure they had the right bodies. And then when the DNA came back at negative, then they're like, well, we just dug up the wrong graves. And it's like, you just didn't find what you wanted to find.
Right.
So
was that the ones out in Duchesne?
No, that was later. Yeah, that was the Henry Long. But this was actually down in San Vicente, Bolivia.
I saw that on TV.
It was a Nova special in the 90s.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait, Bill. I've always been a big fan of Butch, and I can't wait to hear all the stuff about him.
So because I'm a treasure hunter.
Yeah.
So, and there's stories that, he robbed all this stuff. Do you think that they hid some of this stuff around, and maybe some of it could still be hidden around, or do you research that?
Absolutely, they had to hide it because, like, for example, Winnemucca was all gold. I mean, that was one of the things they sought gold over currency, because currency, we didn't have national currency at the time, and so they had individual currency, and they usually had to be signed by the bank president once they arrived. And so some of the robberies, they got unsigned bank bills, but they have serial numbers so they can trace them and track them in that. But gold is untraceable, so that was much more desirable. And I mean, you're carrying, you've got
a lot of weight.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight. So and you're trying to escape from a posse, and I would think you'd want to bury that and then come back and get it later. And there's a good possibility they never made it back or couldn't find it or whatnot. So I think that's a very real possibility.
So what did your grandma say about the movie?
She loved it.
She liked it.
She didn't believe the ending.
Well,
she said, if I believe that's what happened to him, I couldn't have watched it more than one time. But she thought it captured his character, and she said, he was fun-loving, and that's the one thing in my research is he was a people person. He loved people. He was able to make friends wherever he went. That instilled loyalty to these friends, and so they would hide him out, and he wasn't a pathological killer, and that just he loved people, and so I think that's why he kind of stood out, and I think that was part of his upbringing. It was different than maybe some other. He didn't come from a broken home, so. But
I think Sundance had a pretty sordid personality, didn't he?
Yeah, they said he was. Had a temper, but I think he was also quiet and shy, and he wasn't as outgoing as Butch would be in that. So, there's fun stories. You go up in Wyoming, and they said that when the posses would come in, they would just come in and eat all the food, take all the blankets, and when the outlaws were around, they would help chop wood, and and Butch would talk to him about don't use foul language around the family, and so I mean, who are you gonna like? You're gonna like the outlaws, or you're gonna like the lawmen that come in and expect everything given to them and that. So I think he was smart enough to.
There's a pretty fine line.
Oh yeah.
With the law being halfway outlaws anyway.
Well, yeah. Well, we know Frank Canton that and I'll talk about Butch's brother Dan Parker that was also an outlaw, but Frank Canton was a convicted murderer in Texas and went up to Wyoming, changed his name, and became a U.S. Marshal. So I mean, yeah, there was a very thin line there.
Yeah, I bet.
Same with Matt Warner. He was a sheriff in Price or something.
Yeah, later on after, I think he ran under his real name, Willard Christiansen or something, and nobody knew who he was. So then he ran as Matt Warner and was able to win.
Well, I know out at the John Jarvie Ranch, they've got stuff out there that say that Butch and Sundance had come in at Thanksgiving one year and spent Thanksgiving dinner with John Jarvie.
Yeah, there's a big story that the Wild Bunch kind of hosted I think Ann Bassett talked about that, but the date she gave, I think Butch was in prison or something, so she could have got her dates wrong or whatever. But
when I was a kid, I had an uncle that used to go up and take care of Josie Morrison, Josie Bassett, and I'd been up there 2 or 3 times as a kid and seen her, talked to her, been in her house. They let it kind of dilapidate, and then they went back in and fixed it up. But
right.
Cool little area. So if you're up there looking to see things, I mean, John Jarvie Ranch is great. Josie Bassett's cabin is a really interesting place to go see.
Yeah, the museum over in Craig, I just gave a talk, it's been a year or so, but they had actually, Josie's family had donated a lot of her records to the museum, and they actually have voice recordings of her talking and that, which was kind of fun. But that's one of the things I remember. Harv Murdoch, Elsie's grandson, said that he would go and visit Josie and would kind of tease her about Butch and that, he didn't really come back, and she was like, pretty adamant, I know what I'm talking about, I saw him. So
and you think about it, these guys haven't been gone that long.
Right.
When did the Bassetts die?
I think Josie passed in the 60s or so.
I was in school then.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, and I'm from Vernal.
Are you?
And my relatives talk about the old outlaws that come through there, and Butch Cassidy. My grandpa was a little young, but I think he told me once he'd seen him in town.
Yeah, there's
out there really liked him. They got along with him.
There's a fun story there where he had just got out of prison, and Elsie married a local girl there, Maud Davis, and her family ended up having a ranch up Indian Canyon. But he went back to see. She ended up, I think, once he went to prison, she divorced him, and she kind of had a sad life. But anyway, the local lawman got word that Butch and Elsa were in town, and so they went out there to the Davis Ranch, and I think Elsie was in a cabin or something, and they said, oh, he's gone or whatever, and then they came back into town, and Charlie Krause had a saloon in Vernal, and his old house is just off of Main Street. It's still standing there, where I guess the saloon was in front. It's long gone, but the old house is still there. But one of the Davis boys was on the porch of the saloon, and when the posse came in, he hurried and went in, and I guess Butch was in there and gave him word that they were back, and so he let out the back door and that. But the whole story of Matt Warner and his arrest and that, and Butch,
Was he arrested because of the gunfight they had out there?
Up Dry Creek,
Fork?
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, Butch is out of prison. He's served his time, and he goes and robs a bank to get funds to get Matt out of prison. So, I mean, the loyalty and the friendships, that's pretty cool, too, So
That is cool.
Man, you got access to a lot. You got any access to where he buried any of the gold?
yeah, well, I used to tease people. That's how I got through college. That was my scholarship fund there.
So anyways, man, I'm excited to hear the full story because it's a big deal around here. Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, the Wild Bunch, it's a big deal. And the train robberies, man, I'm tracking down some train robberies up in the Uintas, up above Manila area, that I don't know if it had to deal with Butch Cassidy or not, but it's, some $20 gold coins that was stolen off of some trains. And there's a lot of outlaw history around here, and it's cool to hear about it and try and track it down. So I'm excited to hear what all you have to say.
Well, looking forward to it. Yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
It'll be fun.
And with that said, man, that's a wrap, and we'll see everybody August 23rd and 24th at the Moon Lake Gathering, 2024, Altamont, Utah. We'll be doing a lot more information coming out. We got a lot of cool things happening, and Bill Betenson is one of the cool things. And we'll see y'all, and that's a wrap.
All right, thanks.